Hello and welcome to, sadly, the last day of London Menswear Fashion Week. I think it's been a very successful week, but our panel today will tell us just what they think. And before we start looking at the show that we're looking at this morning, I would like them perhaps to introduce themselves and then talk about what they think of the fashion week so far. Then we will go to this show. So off we go.
Hi, I'm James Brown, I'm a hairdresser. And so far this week, I haven't really seen anything that's that I like, really. So I'm hoping that this is going to be a bit better today.
Well, that's a good start. We'll come back to why you don't like it.
I wish I'd have said that. I'm Chris Sutton. I'm a fashion designer and Marla Manson's fashion director. And so far, I've seen a lot of shows. And generally, I think that it's quite strong. Strong in its intention. I don't necessarily love everything, but there's some bold stuff happening, and I like it.
So I think that's an interesting point straight away. The intention is often different to the actual...
Yeah, sort of.
The way it's done.
I'm Daryoush. I'm a freelance fashion writer and lecturer. I think it's the streetwear point is reminding me of something that Tom Ford said, that when you get into your 30s, you find that the culture catches up with you. So I think this is a great moment for men's fashion, because I feel like the fashion that I always wanted to see on the catwalks is happening.
Mandi?
My name's Mandi Lennard, and I run a fashion consultancy called Mandi's Basement, and I've been going to a lot of shows, and I think London Collections Men, which is in is it third season now?
Third, yes.
Is brilliant, and thank God it's the last day, because it's very intense.
When you say brilliant, in what way? What are you getting?
Strong ideas and visual texture, the music I'm hearing at the shows, the people that are going to the shows, the enthusiasm, the amount of space that the national media are giving to menswear, which I kind of helped start it with Lulu back at, with Top Man. It was Lulu's idea, Lulu Kennedy from Fashionista, to start a menswear dedicated few days a week. And back then, I remember the Times had a very small menswear section, and when we were starting with this, we got in touch, and they actually said, no, we're not going to have the column anymore, because the news, it's not, people aren't reading menswear fashion. So fast forward a few years, and the media support is incredible. I mean, really got to hand it to the editors for supporting it like this.
Well, and also hand it to the organisers, because it's the organisers who build up this enormous buzz. There's a huge buzz about it, I think, which is always exciting. That's what people come for.
Well, Charlie Porter tweeted yesterday that he thought it was brilliant that Alex Fury, who's obviously ex-Fashion Show Studio and Love magazine, it was the first time a national newspaper editor was going to the shows in Milan and Paris, the menswear shows. That's quite significant in itself.
That's a big jump forward. I remember a newspaper, which will remain nameless, getting rid of us going to the shows because our editor said it's only homosexuals who are interested in fashion, and there are no homosexuals who read our newspaper. It's a classic. I'll remember it for the rest of my life. But and it wasn't so long ago, and how old-fashioned does that seem now?
Wow.
Now we've got to come to you. Why haven't you found it
just exciting? What I've seen, not that I've been looking for it, but what I have seen, picking up what you're saying, it's been in the media. From what I have seen in the media, it's hasn't been that positive. But
the comments?
Just like that, it's ridiculous, men in cropped tops, it's just, I don't relate to a lot of the men's fashion at all. I mean, I just don't relate to plastic shoes and cropped tops and oil all over the bodies. I don't relate to it.
You're referring to the Astrid Anderson show. That grooming was fantastic. That's how I want my, dirty grooming.
I don't get it.
James, I want to ask you...
And going back to your comment about what the editor said about it being for homosexuals, I mean, that word homosexual, but that to me, it's just so beyond what... I don't understand it. I cannot get my head around it. It was a complete waste of time. Why anybody would give attention, money or time or effort on producing something like that. I don't get it.
Can I just say something, Jay? I'm going to ask you a question first of all. What newspaper do you read?
All different ones. All
dealing
different
Because you're
ones.
sounding like a particular news.
Am I?
Yeah, we all read
But
that
you know what
article
you're
in the Daily
saying
Mail.
is,
Sorry.
if we look back to the arts, let's not think about fashion. If you look back to Stravinsky and Nijinsky and all of these people, you know, who changed ballet, changed the way we looked at things, changed fashion, they did it in a shocking way. People walked out. People on the first night of The Rite of Spring, the audience, this very posh, rich audience, they were throwing anything they could find at the dancers because they thought it was an insult. So, you know, all right, we do not expect people to go out with oiled torsos. Well, in certain parts of London, I suppose you could, at this point. But it's saying this is the way forward. You have to have
But
someone
it doesn't look way
give
forward
the
to
way
me. It
forward.
looks like it's from the 80s. So that's not. It looks exactly like a replica of what I've seen before. What I remember from.
Now that's
It's
interesting.
not forward. It's what we've seen before. It's. I want to be inspired. I think, oh, that's good, but they've pushed that on. To me, it just looks like clothes I've seen before when I was a teenager. So it's it's not relevant in my head, but that's what I think.
Right.
You know.
Chris, what are you going to do? Are you going to hit him or
Probably
agree with
not.
him or
Not
what?
at all. I kind of get exactly what you're saying, but the thing is that what that show that you're referring to was doing by pushing in that direction, and it was a little bit sensational, I think, in that way. Do you know what I mean? It was like a crop top, and there were muscle steroid Marys, you know, marching down the runway, and I didn't know if I was in Vauxhall or if I was at a show, and there's a place for that, and you know, there's going to be people that appreciate it. But there are moments where what that was trying to convey is expressed much more beautifully and with much more craft, like with J.W. Anderson, where he did push the boundary of the silhouette and did introduce something feminine and actually quite sexy without going cheap.
You know,
Well,
I
Daryoush, go on.
think the thing is, I'm kind of all
I'm
over
gonna
the
be
place
shot,
here.
aren't I?
Because no. Well, the thing is, partly, look, you're old, you know,
Yeah.
and these people weren't born, so
Yeah.
they hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
But actually, at the same time, I'm very bored of radical supposedly being feminine sexuality. It's like it's very easy shorthand for radical. And on another side, I'd be like, well, Kanye's wearing a skirt constantly, so, you know, it is relevant to straight men, and it is actually changing. I mean, like the fact that fashion, you know, that Hypebeast has completely changed men's fashion, and that men's fashion now is completely relevant to straight guys in a way that it wasn't 5 years ago. So I'm kind of all over the place, because partly I'm like, oh, really? Is that as radical as you can be? Like, when there's so much going on in the world, is the most radical thing being like a girl in bed? You know, and then at the other side of me, it's like, you know, that is happening, that is being pushed. But at the same time, I think, although that was Astrid's best show, I think there were lots of people riffing on that, and lots of people have done it in more interesting ways.
I mean, if someone can show me on this panel someone over the age of 20 who's not a hairdresser from Croydon wearing crop tops, platforms and socks to here and shorts to there, nobody wears it. I want to see something. I could wear that, or someone I know could wear that. I don't know anybody from what I've seen that wears that stuff. I just don't. Maybe in Dorset,
50% of that catwalk. Look, 50% of that catwalk was sportswear, right? Of course, that looks ridiculous. I find, for me, look, I'm really struggle with Astrid, because sometimes I love her and some of what she does, and some of it is too polished and too shiny. But, you know, if you take away the styling, actually those clothes are what we wear, because we got bored of looking at suits because we don't wear them, you know? And also there was kind of a moment in fashion that was an uptight bow tie, little shoe, like, you know, Fantastic Man, amazing magazine, but their fans were boring, you know? And so, you know, this is actually what we wear. You know, I think this is what the people are
If you're
wearing.
under 20,
If you're
I
under
want to hear what Mandy thinks about
Mandy's
this.
going to go.
'Cause I know she's got thoughts on
Just
this.
going back to what Daryoush said, mentioned Hypebeast, which is one of the respected streetwear websites, and actually what you've got to realise is that Hypebeast, Slamx Hype and their ilk, they kind of open the gateway in this wider communication. of Tumblr and everything. I mean, they've only been going for 10 years. So it's only 10 years that people have been fast fed the kind of insider streetwear and luxury streetwear. I mean, I've always got a kick out of the fact that I've had like a head porter bag. And I feel really, really smug. I go for meetings with the press, they don't know what the hell it is, they don't want to know what it is, but inside I'm thinking, well, actually, this is equal quality and exclusivity to Hermes. So, you know, it's this kind of secret thing. Yeah. So when you have these labels, you know, how do you start a streetwear brand anyway? All you need is to design a t-shirt and have exclusivity. That's all you need. Anyone can do it. And if you can't afford to do it, you do crowdfunding on Kickstarter. Yeah, Chris did that recently, and you know, you can raise the money, and it's all communication.
Yeah.
Wow.
But what's happened now is that we've got to this 10-year cycle, and all those people that appreciated discerning streetwear or the newer ideas or the Stussy 80s, which, you know, was very significant. That was like the Chanel inspiration and the idea of having an international tribe of exclusivity and mixing cultural references, like there was reggae references. I mean, they still have all the cultural references, but now they're collaborating with people like Dinos Chapman, and you know, they don't need to collaborate with Chanel for real. They've got the equal type of thing. But Astrid Anderson's show, I loved it. I really, really did. I didn't like the lace catsuit, which media like the Daily Mail predictably picked up on. And actually a lot of people on Twitter, after last season with Craig Green's mad wooden headpieces and siblings, oversized mittens and things like that, it was quite a bit of humour on Twitter with a lot of the designers saying, oh, that was predictable, look at the Daily Mail, you've obviously done something right. But I love that show.
Yeah, but they obviously wanted to be in the Daily Mail to produce something like that.
But I love that show. You've got to remember that when you left that show, all the press were talking about the casting. I thought the casting was amazing. The guys that had been picked, I love the grooming. It wasn't just no grooming men or invisible makeup. I mean, that they were down and dirty, and I love that. That reminded me of Tom Murphy when he used to cast at boxing rings. You know, it made it interesting. It added a layer and dimension to it. Also, Elgar styles it from ID, someone who's very, very respected, who people like him and Matthew Josephs are defining streetwear, actually.
But do you think that we're running ahead of what the public actually can understand?
But that's the point.
That is the point.
You think it's a good thing?
Well, I mean, fashion's about change. If you're not ahead of the fashion, then you're behind of the fashion. I mean, it would be ridiculous if
But if you get too far ahead, you lose them.
That's true.
And all of these young designers, they're still very much in a position where they could disappear completely.
But we don't have a market. We need to make one. We don't have a Dolce & Gabbana. We don't have. Well, we're inventing one. So we don't have. There's no point pretending to be. You know, look at all the brands that bore you to death that none of us talk about, that none of the newspapers talk about. There's a lot of people showing at London men's collections that are trying to be, you know, a sub Aquascutum or a sub Burberry, but nobody cares. And you know, and they're the kind of thing that sort of Arena magazine would have written about in the early 90s. You know, we don't have big brands. We don't have advertising budgets that can convince people that boring clothes are fashionable. So we have to. The only way we're going to build an industry is by, you know, making a name for ourselves.
So by making a name, what you mean is putting ridiculous outfits down the runway to get press and get attention. I
do have sympathy for you.
Do you know what I mean? I don't like the thing about London is it's always known for being wacky. It has been for years, and people go to New York for serious, you know, just to make money. Why doesn't London think about making money instead of being wacky and ridiculous and everybody laughing at it? Take it more seriously.
Hypebeast is one of the biggest sites in the world.
It's not about that.
It's commercial.
To me, I look at it and I find it ridiculous. And a lot of other people that aren't in fashion that I talk to, men, say, what is that about? I don't get it.
But who are you speaking to? David
Gannon? No, not David Gannon. Different men, like men, you know, men, whoever I'm just chatting to. They don't get it. Well, they want to see something they get.
No, I think you're wrong. I think that they get it, they just don't give a shit. Because, I mean, I used to make stuff that was a little bit unwearable, and I knew that, but the point was that it was bloody interesting. And sometimes something interesting, it can
Maybe
spark
I've just
something
moved
else.
on and I just don't find it interesting.
But
Maybe it's I'm
Well,
not getting it.
now
That's fair
that
enough.
could
But
well be.
That's fair enough
50%,
point.
50% of, look, yes, there's the lace catsuit, but 80% of what's happening on these catwalks is shorts, t-shirts. It's mega commercial, because actually that's what people can afford.
Yeah.
You know, I remember, I'm sure it's long enough ago now for me to say this, but I remember, you know, Kim Jones saying that at the beginning of his career, you know, he made t-shirts and he sold them. You know, he had catwalk collections, but how did he fund himself into a position?
T-shirts.
It's with t-shirts.
Do you know how valuable those t-shirts are now, the ones that he designed then?
Really?
They're really cult.
Oh, I
Can we
live in
go
London,
back
then.
to the lace suit? Why do we think that men shouldn't wear a lace suit? Is there any reason?
Oh, do we really have to focus on that?
I think,
Well,
I
no,
think it's the
I
most
mean, I don't-
obvious thing.
I think
I'm
it's
interested in why do we assume that it's silly to put it on the catwalk? Why wouldn't a man wear a lace suit? That's what I'm asking.
But for a simple practical answer that isn't reductive, it's simply, I don't really think it's sportswear or streetwear. I think it's an interesting piece. It's interesting, that's it. And it's there to lift the show a bit. Do you know what I mean? You can't just put people in t-shirts and baggy shorts. You know,
Yeah, but are you
obviously.
saying it can only be sportswear or streetwear? Are you saying that English designers can't do formal wear?
No, well, I'm talking about this show. You know, if we're talking about all the shows, then we have to talk about everything that we think is wacky.
Sure.
That one piece was obviously a step maybe too far. To me, it looked a little bit fetishy. It was something, if it was in black, you'd see it in Ann Summers. Is that awful to say?
You see, what I think is that there is a limit to the number of elements that look masculine.
Didn't
And
like this.
I think that, no, but I think that really we have to get rid of this masculine, feminine sort of diaspora, as it were. We have to decide what fashion is all about. And there's no reason why a man shouldn't wear a skirt. There's no reason whatsoever. And what you were saying earlier is true. I've got a builder at the moment, I hope he's there, busily building walls for me. He wears a kilt. And he looks terrific in it, of course. He's got a good body and he's beautifully tanned and everything. He's out in the open all the time. But he couldn't be more straight. You know, so this idea that if you put on a skirt or a kilt, you're going to be a gay boy, it's just nonsense.
I mean,
Even in Ireland.
Nonsense, yeah.
But there's an interesting power, isn't there, in I think one of the, you know, what's quite interesting, because, you know, what also is going on with this sportswear thing is it's about hip hop and the fact that, you know, the cultural ascendancy again of hip hop. And, you know, and I think what's interesting there is that you've got camp and masculinity. If you've got, you know, what was that film with Daryoush in 3000 BC or whatever it was, the Greek film. So you've got camp and masculine power, and you've got fairies, and I struggle, because at the same time I don't know if I want to be I don't know if fairy, I don't want to listen to Lady Gaga. I want to listen to hip hop, you know, and so I don't know if all my fashion shows need to be, because everybody's doing it. Everybody, you know, Hood by Air also had lots of lace on their show. Everybody's you know, J.W. Anderson to me looks like women's wear.
But why should lace be a feminine fabric?
That's the
I mean,
point.
we've been programmed to think
I've
of
got
it
a
as
lace
feminine
shirt from the
fabric.
60s, which is beautiful. Black
Oh, hello.
lace, beautiful
Hello.
shirt. But it's how it's portrayed. What my problem is with the shows is it's portrayed like it's just... I just don't like how it's like, it's a certain type, it's like greasy, wet, gay, dark. Why is it always portrayed like that? And it makes it's not, they don't, it's like they're not taking it seriously, so therefore I don't take it seriously. That's my problem. I have no problem with lace. I've got a vintage, beautiful lace shirt. I've got trainers, I've got all sorts of clothes of different styles. One day I'll wear a suit, one day I'll look more street. It doesn't matter to me, and I love fashion, but it's when it's all portrayed. Like, if you take one image from each show, it's almost like from every show this week, it's almost like it's the same show. It's all portrayed the same. That's my problem. That's what I'm trying to say. Maybe it's not.
I think there's lots of nuances that differ them. So, for example, Katie Erie's show yesterday was great. And it was very skater vibe, and I took a picture of a model on Instagram holding a skateboard, and everyone loved it, lots of hits. But then suddenly Lucy and Clark, who's like skate god, who's like in the Supreme campaigns, and hangs with the Palace guys, is in their films, he puts a thumbs down picture. And and I was thinking to myself, because when you post things, if you get a negative thing, you think, oh no, I don't want to know you. But actually, he had every right to say whatever he wanted. But it was interesting that the skate fraternity aren't having that. They aren't having a cool London designer holding a skate deck down a runway.
Although, you know, Lucian is massively part of Palace.
Yeah.
You know, so Palace is a label that you won't see much talked about at London Fashion Week, but it's very important to talk about the Palaces, Pyrex, Hood by Air, because what's happening underneath what you don't see on the catwalk shows is that there's been a huge boom in energy, in fact, in straight guys or just gay guys that aren't fairies. Because I know what you mean. There's that London clubland thing that as a northerner has always bothered me. That fayness, that kind of just like, we're really good. Sorry, but like there's a nastiness about that, and a kind of selfishness, and a kind of I don't care about the world. But so the thing is that the fashion, the catwalk is communicating with all these t-shirt labels that aren't being talked about. So Palace was at the beginning of that about 3 or 4 years ago, this t-shirt label, and you know, they're very much a gang, and they make their own films, and they're all credible skaters.
And DJs. And
DJs, and they have amazing parties. And there's a communication going on away from the catwalk. And also a lot of, so I think that's what's being missed out here.
Okay, before we go to the actual show, one last thing from you, Chris. We might come back to this, because it's a very interesting conversation we're having, but we do have to look at the show.
Okay.
So do you want to say anything to round this part off? Maybe Mandi would like to.
And I understand completely what James is saying. I think you've got a point. I mean, I think it's going a bit stereotypical. It's presenting this kind of image that I don't know if it has a lot of integrity, and we really need integrity to be represented internationally, because
exactly.
you can be undermined with one line in every newspaper if you set yourself up for it.
Exactly.
Mandi, have you got anything to add?
Well, I think we're missing one point, which is it's a very, very significant time for streetwear. And I think Daryoush, actually, it's great that he's on this panel, because he really is a good commentator on streetwear.
Sure. Yeah.
Just having worked with him and know his knowledge about it. But there's been some very significant things that have happened this year. One is that Cause, a designer that we all really, really respect, who was sponsored, has a label Original Fake, and like if you go to Tokyo, the first place you want to go if you're into it is to the Original Fake store. He's just done his last collection after 7 years, and a Bathing Ape, another one who's had this incredible influence. Nigo has left his own label now. IT have bought it. It's almost like being run from Hong Kong now, from spearheading a whole generation of Japanese streetwear. Then the Hood by Air is very interesting. Actually, Show Studio are about to collaborate with Hood by Air, so that's going to be very interesting. But in the middle of London Fashion Week, Hood by Air did an event at Selfridges, and this menswear thing, it is punishing, going to everything.
Oh yes,
loads of parties every night. It's crazy. But honestly, there was a really heavyweight crowd there, and they've flown in a lot of people like Virgil from Pyrex, and again, he was the guy who took vintage Ralph Lauren and started printing it with stuff and like selling it for $500, and it sounds really weird, but actually that was so respected. And then the antidote to that is that Kanye's wearing it, and then Kim Kardashian borrows it and she's got it wrapped around her waist, and it's like, well, what is cool anymore? How can you keep this exclusivity?
Well, that ain't cool, that's for sure.
Well, we'll come back, I promise. Let's now look at the current show, which is Shaun Samson, and I don't know whether you're going to find him cool or not. I think that probably we're going to have a strong comment from my right here straight away with this one. Do we know exactly what's happening there? The silvery, shiny bit, what's it all about?
It doesn't look like pants over trousers. It actually looks like the fabric is like Helmut Lang vibe there.
Yes, yes. this sort of hits quite a lot of the things that you find so irritating.
I like this. I love that
do?
shirt. I think it's great. Yeah, that to me is acceptable, and I can understand that, and that's spot on. I can imagine a guy walking down the street in summer, opening. I get that. That's really nice. I like that look.
Okay.
That is the level of what I want to see, really, and what I understand, and what I think everyone else can understand that isn't in fashion and doesn't try to intellectualize fashion.
So
guys in the street.
So that's your sticking
understand
point.
that.
That's you put your marker on that.
Yeah.
That's as far as we can
Yeah.
go. All right, let's see what he does. Let's see some more.
Matthew Joseph, who styles Shaun Samson's show, he's actually become a bit of a muse for a whole generation of people in fashion.
Right.
And he's always dressed a certain way. And I've just noticed in the last season that his influence, and I think a lot of the designers he works with look up to him so much, and he's doing cover shoots for ID. So his influence, his currency is really high now. You know that he's ready to do big campaigns. He's been bubbling under for so long, and part of the movement is him, Rob Mayer, who does all the art direction for Shaun Samson, and the show, when he had his last show, it opened to a massive Master Race soundtrack, hip hop. The whole brand is very.
This is really nice. What I'm seeing here, like so far, this is looking really nice. This is what I'd expect to see. So
what I want to know is what are the trademarks that you can see in here that are coming out?
Well, you mean a kind of Shaun Samson trademark? Yeah. This is a little bit more sophisticated and mature for him, actually. I'm quite pleased that it's moving on. You know, he's developing it. Is that underwear, the waistband?
It's difficult to say.
Rather than the actual trousers.
It might be.
Because I mean, that, you see, this is the thing that's going on with streetwear that's really exciting. Streetwear is about brand building, right? And that is a lot. I know what you mean, the silly fashion that doesn't seem to take it seriously, but because streetwear is tuned into the brand, if he's doing his own pants, that's commercial, because that is what people are going to buy. And that tuning into branding is really exciting, because it's not just about making money, it's also about communities and tribes. And
I'm sorry, no, it's about making money.
And gangs.
It's about making
No,
money.
it's not
it's
merely
fashion
about
that,
making money.
you know,
Of course,
all
you've got to
fashions,
make money.
all fashions
Hairdressers
about making money.
Exactly,
Everything's
yeah.
about
No,
making
but
money.
look, there is a quality to, you know, you could say me and Mandi are all over social networks because we are trying to make money, or you could also say it's because you're trying to communicate with people, and the two are kind of synonymous. And you know,
I think also mention Calvin Klein, the significance of that, because Calvin Klein was probably one of the first
He started
brands.
it all.
Yeah,
He started it all, absolutely.
Cause started by actually graffitiing Calvin Klein ads of Kate Moss, and they're so collectible now.
Sure.
So they put the ad up and they'd be washed off and pulled off. And now, and also there's the whole lawsuit. That's the other ingredient at the moment of significance, is the fact that Supreme has got a big lawsuit with
Suzanne, the artist.
No, she made a point. She's been commentating on it, but I can't remember the name of the company. But it's about the whole.
What's the lawsuit actually about?
Their box logo that they use, which has actually been taken from the artist, inspired by the artist to start with. But the problem is, last summer there was a big campaign in New York and LA and Shoreditch High Street of the Supreme, of Kate Moss wearing Supreme. But this ad didn't even exist for more than an hour because everyone graffitis over them. Right. Famous graffiti artists were graffitiing over them. I was walking down street in New York at Bowery, and someone had turned Kate Moss into Biggie Smalls, put a crown on an angle off her head. They were even cooler than the ad campaign, and that's
amazing.
Is this about anarchy? Is modern street fashion about that sort of anarchy, destroying
street fashion started from anarchy.
Well, Chris, what do you think?
It's about it's anti-institution. It's kids making something themselves. You don't have to. I mean, like you say, it is the complete opposite of the Savile Row tradition. I mean, anybody who's working class and who wants to create things and who has an inspiration can build it up, because it is, like you say, it's a brand. You can get your T-shirt, something recognizable, and you can build up something, whether it be a brand or you know, forward fashion.
Yeah, you used an interesting word there, working class. Do you think this is a class? There are class divides here in
the
London
street. What does that
fashion?
mean? I mean, you know, the people.
No, I mean Shaun Samson has a Hermes covered sofa, so like he's not working class, but he's pulling on a certain amount of that energy. There is a you know, generational thing, and it is like, you know, look, what's the best moment really for British fashion in the last 100 years was probably Carnaby Street. It was when it was accessible to the masses, and this is something that people can tune into. Maybe they just buy the t-shirt, maybe you know, this look will be expensive, but I think we're experiencing something akin to Carnaby Street happening, and London pisses all over the rest of the world when it comes to this, you know?
I think it's also important to mention some of the stores and retailers that have helped this break into
Here
the
in
reality. Machine A, I think they existed before, but they've just relaunched, and they're providing a very important gap between, because if let's say a big store buys a new label, something like this, the first or second season, it's actually a little bit detrimental to that label because you need to keep it quite low key. And when you deliver to a store like that, suddenly, and Business of Fashion did a great feature on this recently, when you deliver to a store like that, they kind of dictate to you how you have to work with them. And these designers have got no experience yet. They don't know how it works. They're probably all still ringing the parents for advice. And so it has to be, and these stores, so obviously Brown's, Folk at the Diffusion store, there's Machine A, opening ceremony actually with the first British stockist last summer of Shaun Samson. So an American company has rocked up in London for the Olympics, opened a temporary store, and actually they're giving the British designers a leg up.
Right. Okay, let's go back to Shaun and see what else we're seeing.
Let's not, because the waistband is slightly reminiscent also of Nazir Mazar, and I think, you know, Nazir Mazar is, you know, a lot of somebody in Fader wrote an article about the British streetwear revolution and said that Carrie was, you know, Carrie cassette player was the kind of goddess of it. But Nazir Mazar, if she's the goddess, is like, you know, he needs to be mentioned. He's the number 2.
Another one that Matthew Joseph is styling, and actually his show tonight is very significant because it's his first on schedule show. And a lot of people know him because he did his couture headpieces, so he's very exciting. But
what do you think of this?
Wow.
It's very clean for Shaun.
It's very crisp, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, it's really, you know, it's really sophisticated, I think.
Yeah, and I think that the men that would have bought, you know, you've got to remember that when Stussy broke out, when Shaun Stussy in 1977 was sat listening to The Clash and all these punk records, and the Stussy logo was inspired by all that as well, the kind of guys that were dying for this sort of thing, the only way they could have a proper job and go to work and look cool was to wear Comme des Garçons. I mean, there wasn't any other brand that you could wear. Michael Koppelman, who was like the godfather of British streetwear, who owns Hideout, very significant shop, bought Bathing Ape, bought Stussy to Europe, who's been really instrumental in a lot of it, and brought to my attention, that's been very special to me, all the Japanese streetwear labels like Double Taps and Neighbourhood, and now Viz Vim. He actually worked in the city. And he didn't like that formality, and he was a breakout kid, just like Shaun Stussy was. But actually, what I'm seeing from this show is that if you're, you know, if it was a different generation, this is actually the equivalent of somebody buying a cool suit. This is what they're going to wear, this is what they're going to buy, because it's going to be the same price points, but you can actually wear, it's much more wearable and realistic to the urban landscape.
Well, also, we don't do suit jobs, you know. How many of us need to wear a suit?
Well, we
for
don't
work?
in London, maybe not, but you know, it's a very small world fashion. Like the people on the street cannot go to work. Like a Peter from Peterborough cannot go to work in a skirt with number 5 on.
Yeah, but
and that's what it has to relate more to those people. They're the people spending the money. They're not the very small minority who want to look street. You can't look street when you're on a counter.
But actually, the vast majority of fashion is sold to a tiny tiny elite.
Sure.
You know, except for in Italy. I mean, maybe it's changed a bit, but I remember 10 years ago reading that 60% of designer fashion was sold in Italy.
But instead of it being sold to a tiny, tiny minority, why not do things that are more wearable, but push it a little bit that can sell to the majority, not the minority?
There's nothing unwearable.
Isn't that what
about that.
CNA was there for?
Well,
There will be a synthesis. There is people doing a synthesis. I mean, Kim Jones also needs to be mentioned in this conversation because he, you know, there's a gap. There was a gap between what you wore as a student and a youth and what you wore when you were expected to wear a suit. And for me, you know, when I used to be a barman, I used to just refuse to serve people in suits because I was 20 years old and I just was like, well, they're not cool. And you know, and I need...
What a fascist you are.
Yeah, I know, but you know, I was a kid. And you know, so the thing is, you know, for me, wearing a suit is kind of class and generational traitorism. So it's good to have, and I think a lot of people think like that, and it's good to have a costume for people in between, you know, before you sort of have to get old. And, you know, Rick Owens obviously was providing that, and Raf to some extent, before he kind of, you know, matured, and Kim Jones, you know, and I think all these designers are kind of doing that, and there will be a synthesis. I mean, Kim now with Louis Vuitton kind of makes a synthesis of this kind of thing. Rick Owens is a bit of a synthesis.
Can I just go back to what we're looking at here? What is wrong with the number 5 on a skirt or on trousers? We would accept it if it was on a t-shirt.
Well, I've got it tattooed on my hand.
Well, what's the difference?
The difference is we're talking about fashion. Like, who, except for a very small minority of your friends or people in Dalston, can wear this? The public who. People should be making fashion for everybody, not for a small, pretentious fashion minority.
But this is now. This is what's happening now.
It's not what's happening now, darling, because this happened when I was 18 with Michael Copperman, who we used to hang out, we used to go to Japan. This has been going on since 1984.
Yeah, but six people did.
This is not new.
This will be...
I've got all the old stuff. See, I've got Sarah Glamour.
We're talking about whether it's acceptable.
Yeah.
I would have thought that you could have gone into an office with a number 5 on your shorts, if you're allowed to wear shorts in the office. There'd be a bit of huffing and puffing from upstairs maybe, and a bit of joking, and then it would be accepted.
But I don't understand why it's an issue to have a number 5 on your thing. I mean, there's people going around with like cartoon characters on clothing. What I really don't understand why is having a number 5 on the bottom half of your outfit an issue?
I think it's 855 actually.
But also men buy jackets. Men buy jackets, and this show is full of really nice jackets. If women,
this isn't a particularly good outfit.
If women buy handbags,
let's not focus on that outfit.
If women buy handbags, men buy jackets. You know, that's what they invest in. So a lot of men will have a very basic jean or you know, chino or whatever, or shorts, and they'll spend a lot on the jacket. Yeah. So you know, that I think, you know, that's what you should be looking at as well. It's picking out the key pieces.
What about this? This looks slightly Little Lord Fauntleroy. It only needs a little bit of lace to make it a period piece, really.
Like a, yeah.
That, I think, is way ahead.
Should we move on to maybe another
Let's
one?
move on.
Is that a wrap?
It's a sarong, isn't it?
I like that. I think that's great. I can see you guys wearing that. So I think the customer would probably wear it over leggings.
Yeah.
I mean, also you've got to remember the power of...
that's great. Yeah, I like this.
The power of what's happening with the media and the social media and musicians. You know, actually kids in the North are looking at this, and kids in the North now know the names of fashion designers. They know the names of stylists in a way that people in the 70s knew the names of pop stars and record producers. And so kids are following this, and you know, they will start dressing like this in Liverpool.
I would dispute Peter from Peterborough that you mentioned, because actually Peter from Peterborough is probably on Slamx Hype every night, and he's seen A$AP Rocky hanging out with Raf Simons in Paris, wearing his A$AP times Raf sweatshirt that no one would know unless they were in tune with this kind of underground vein. But you have to keep that exclusivity to sow the seeds of a brand.
He pushes in things every now and again which are totally acceptable. I would say that this is a totally acceptable look.
I think this is pretty
That's
restrained.
very American.
It's what?
Very LA.
very restrained collection. There's nothing too radical. I mean, not having a huge opinion here.
He's from Cali.
Oh, right,
No,
that is so American. Like,
he's Filipino.
Right.
It was brought up in America.
You can totally see that in that.
And he said, I think I read something, he said that he misses California and he wanted to bring a vibe of the summer and the sort of the energy of the summer to this. And this
totally
I think he's doing it very successfully here.
It's fresh.
I think he's a wonderful designer, Shaun.
Also, you know, I mean, it's a new world, and you know, people now are being brought up in schools that are, you know, there's also a racial element to the streetwear thing. You know, and people are being brought up in schools that are over 50% not white. And I think suits and that kind of way of dressing are associated with an old, past imperial way of life. And the whole kind of streetwear thing is a post-racial, post-sexuality even thing. And that's, you know, so it's modern.
Okay.
I think people want to be free spirits as well. And the idea of wearing a suit is convention, and people just want to be themselves. And actually, all you need to do is set up a Tumblr account, or you know, and suddenly you've got your own. You can create your own brand. Yeah. You don't even need a retail outlet. You can just put it on Big Cartel, and you can instantly have your own brand.
Let's stop there for a moment. Thinking about kids and how much money they've got and all the rest of it, how much would you expect a sarong like that to actually sell for?
A lot.
Yeah. By which we mean?
It would, I think, be at least 260 quid, probably more.
So who's he speaking to?
300, 400.
He's talking to a discerning fashion person, somebody who knows what's out there and by choice has homed in on him.
There's moments in this collection where there are pieces that Peter from Petersburg can buy. There's the t-shirt under there, and that's a very wearable, easy jacket. Do you know what I mean? The price points mightn't be great, but we are looking at a catwalk show. You know, it isn't going to exactly be shabby.
You know, and also they'll do collabs. You know, it'll filter down.
You know, even in the Comme des Garçons show, when the collection arrives, let's say in Dover Street Market, they might have things that weren't in the show. But you walk past and you hear the customer saying they want the one on the runway. Yeah. So the power, you know, this is currency to have it showcased in this way. And also, they're not making lookbooks anymore. They release the runway. Once you've got these images, they're on all the news wires, or they're being filtered out to the wider demographic. Even all the commercial stores, like I imagine, you know, the Top Man designers are being very heavily influenced by Top Man design,
absolutely.
by London Collections men.
Oh, can we go back there just a moment? What does that last picture tell us? I mean, is it a sarong? It looks like a towel.
I think it's a towel.
Well,
it's a towel. So if we go back one more to when it's round his waist.
He's taking it off to reveal.
So it's actually not a sarong. It's a towel, and then becomes something much more acceptable, even in Ireland.
Well, was it Louis Vuitton were doing quite good business with the blankets, weren't they?
Absolutely.
For a while.
Absolutely.
Supreme actually did those little bar towels that you find on the top of
on the
bar,
pubs,
and very British thing.
Very.
And people, some of the rap stars were wearing them tucked into their jeans waist. And actually, there was a fantastic cover a couple of months ago that Matthew Stone shot with Matthew Josephs of Clash magazine, a music magazine that, again, Rob Mayer, the art director of Shaun Samson, art directs that magazine. And ASAP was actually wearing a towel underneath a baseball cap. That was all he was wearing on the cover of this magazine. And there were two covers, and that was the one that was everyone picked up on.
Yeah. Okay, so a final summation of what we've had a marvellous talk. I've really enjoyed this. I've learned a lot, actually. But let's just talk about this show. Good, bad, average, exciting. Let's start with
Excellent.
Mandi.
I think for him to do a pared down, you know, outfit like this, it's shown confidence, and I think that London Collections Men is quite empowering for the designers that show within it. There's a lot of support now. The designers are very responsible with their business and quality. They don't want to be just picked up on for a gimmick, and I think he's showing a very refined permutation of what he's capable of.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Better, you know, more interesting than I thought it would be. He's obviously taking it in a new direction. He's obviously trying to mature into something a bit more
sophisticated and probably more accessible.
And to make more money.
Yeah.
Which is what it's about.
I mean, I like parts of it. I'm not going to do that whole thing where everybody says it's great, but I think that the most sophisticated form of style sometimes is simplicity. And if we did criticize Astrid for maybe going too far, this should be credited for the restraint and simplicity of being wearable and crisp. And he is Californian. Do you know what I mean? It's got a nice wearable vibe
Very
to it.
relaxed.
It is relaxed. It's not fussy, and I don't think most of the shows we've been to, some of it I feel like having a panic attack. It's like boom, boom, and it's like, and after all the shows, and you're even a sibling, which is beautiful, but there's a lot happening. I would have felt probably quite, relaxed at this.
I love it. Panic attack fashion. Okay,
I like this. I think it's great. I don't think it's anything groundbreaking, but I like that. I think it's a really nice show. And I can relate to it, which is 43. I'm not old or past it, but I can relate to that. Do you know what I mean? And
You'll be
I
in a
think
tile next
anybody,
week.
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
I'll get a
right.
simmer frame next week. I think it's good. It's good. I like it.
Well, I like what you've all said this morning. I think it's been fascinating. I'm sure that people who've been watching have found it fascinating as well.
You haven't answered our question yet, Colin, that we asked you at the beginning.
What was that?
Are you in the hood, and have you got a string vest on underneath that?
Are you
suit?
wearing a string vest?
Well, these things are revealed only to the most intimate of friends. Certainly not when cameras are around. Okay, thank you all
Mine's
very
only
much
revealed when
indeed.
there's cameras around.
And thank you very much for watching us.
What's the point of living?